Hello, beautiful people.
And welcome to, I guess, a rotation guide on Yelan teams. I'm planning on potentially making this an actual series for new and old characters, where I'll basically just go over, eventually, every character in the game, and the way that you can min-max their rotations to get the most out of their kit. For Yelan, let's start with like a baseline understanding of her kit. You've got her breakthrough barb, you've got her E, and you've got her burst. When you cast her E during her burst, you get an additional proc of her burst hits, right? So when you just do your E normally, right, I just get 1 instance of damage. But if I do it during my burst, you get these additional 3 instances of damage. Because of that, there is an incentive to use your E after your burst. But it's important to note that that's not necessarily what you want. When you're on the field, when you catch your particles, you get more energy out of them. Sorry, I almost died there. Right? And so that is an incentive to use EQ instead of QE. If you do EQ, you can catch your particles in the middle of your burst animation, right? You don't have to wait as long, which is nice. You can also just stay on Yelan after your Q and E. And if you have a breakthrough barb available, you can do that and then swap out, right? That's something you can do. That is going to let you catch your particles and not waste any relevant time. In order to do it perfectly, what you want to do is you'd want to do Q, auto, E, auto, breakthrough barb, swap out. I haven't practiced it much, so I'm probably not going to get it. But it would look more or less like this. Q, auto, E, auto, breakthrough barb, auto, swap out. When I'm going to be showing those rotations, I'm probably not going to bother doing this because it's a very minor damage increase and it's a pain in the ass to do. But it's good to start the video with this just so that you guys know it is something that you can do. Now, last thing that I want to cover before getting into the actual team rotations is how Yelan's kit interacts with rotations in general. Her Q applies 2 units of hydro, which means if you do her Q followed by a pyro ability that is also 2 units, you're still gonna have some hydro left, a lot like Child's initial E cast. Her E applies hydro, and the burst it procs also applies hydro, which means you can get 2 hydro applications in a row. So you can wipe an aura and then reapply hydro with her E while you're in her burst. And her E is a 10-second cooldown, which means that in 20-second rotations, if you have a way of swapping back to her after 10 seconds, you kind of want to do it because it's gonna let you get another E and therefore reduce your energy requirements quite a lot. So when you look at, for example, a team like, I don't know, a pretty straightforward Hu Tao double hydro team with Zhongli, because of Hu Tao's long infusion window, you won't be able to get 2 E's on Yelan per rotation, so you'll have to stick to only 1. Now what that means is your energy requirements will be higher. Yelan's burst lasts for 15 seconds. Xingqi's burst lasts for 15 seconds as a baseline, but if you have his Constellation 2, it will last for an additional 3 seconds, which means that you will generally want to start by using Xingqi's burst and then use Yelan's. Now, in a team like this, you have a few choices for the exact order of skills and bursts on your Xingqi and your Yelan. The main idea is you do Xingqi's skill and burst and then Yelan's skill and burst, but the order in which you do skill and burst on both of these can actually vary. Because they're both hydro, what you can do is you can funnel your Xingqi's particles into Yelan and run Xingqi on higher ER, or you can not do that. Now, personally, I like actually going higher ER on Xingqi, slightly lower ER on Yelan, and pre-funneling or funneling Xingqi's particles into Yelan's burst, which would effectively work as follows. So you do Xingqi, Q, E, auto E, Yelan, Q, auto E, auto breakthrough barb, auto Zhongli holds E, and then Hu Tao stuff. Right? Now, as you see, I have way too much ER on my Yelan for this rotation to be optimal, right? You could see that just from the Xingqi pre-funnel particles, I already basically almost had my burst back on Yelan. So in this situation, With the artifacts I'm using right now, if I were to min-max my rotation, I would not be doing this exact rotation. I would be doing Xingqiu EQ rather than QE. But let's show it once more, right? QE. Right, as you can see, just from this, I already almost have my burst back. But on Xingqiu, I don't have as much. The other one that you can do that will generally result in a shorter setup is Xingqiu EQ, followed by Yelan EQ, and then Zhongli immediately. Now, because we're doing Yelan EQ instead of QE, that means we don't have to stay on her to catch her particles. And not having to stay on her to catch her particles means we can swap out of her earlier, which means effectively our setup is not taking as long. At the end of your rotation, depending on how well you did your setup, it's possible that your Xingqiu is still going to be on cooldown. So let's... And then if he is, you can just sneak in a Zhongli burst and then keep going. Simple as that. Now, if you have a high refined Favonius lens on your Zhongli and you have enough crit rate on him, you can actually get a proc when you use his burst at the end of your rotation like that, and a proc when you hold his E after doing Xingqiu E, Q, and Yelan EQ. And that's going to basically give you 2 additional 5 procs in your rotation, which will drive down both Xingqiu and Yelan's ER relatively significantly. Let's move on to a different team. You want to start with your Xingqiu burst because it's the one that lasts the longest. Then your Yelan burst because it's the one that lasts the second longest. Then Guoba. Did I just get a 5 proc from Guoba? Nice. But yeah, Xingqiu is 18, Yelan is 15, Changling is 14. So you do Xingqiu, Yelan, Changling. But there can be a slight variation on this rotation as well. So the baseline rotation, right? I've already explained the EQ and QE like possibilities on Xingqiu and Yelan. It applies here as well. But other than that, right, this is the baseline rotation. You want to do Q into E on Changling generally. Unless you have Crimson Witch on her. Right, very cool. And then you just start over, right? But you can actually cheat out some additional Fav procs by warping your rotation a tiny little bit. So, if after Xiangling, instead of going directly to Hu Tao, you swap to Xingqiu, and he is on a high refined 5 sword, now for you to actually get a second proc on your 5 sword, you need to be on a very high refine. It has to be, I think, either 4 or 5. At refinement 3, it doesn't work. So I'm not gonna get the additional proc because I don't have the higher refinement 5, but it can work at higher refinement. Also, I really should give him more crit rate so he can actually proc it more often, but whatever. So, you just swap the Xingqiu and then to Hu Tao. And then, before swapping back to Xingqiu, you swap to Xiangling to proc her Fav. And you're basically, by doing these 2 things, cheating out 2 extra Fav procs over your rotation. Now, the specific adaptations on rotations can be very useful to know if, for example, you don't have a Fav sword for your Xingqiu. Then pre-funneling on himself is probably going to be better than funneling on Yelan. If you have, I don't know, Elegy on Yelan or Aqua on Yelan, then putting your Xingqiu on 5 sword and funneling his particles into Yelan is going to help her particles, is going to help her energy generation along. Gonna let you go for offensive stats, and since you already have an offensive weapon, that's gonna, you know, that's gonna feedback loop into itself, and you're gonna get good value out of it, right? Now, for other Hu Tao teams involving Yelan, I guess I could go over the Kazuha stuff, but effectively it's just the same thing. Like, it really is the exact same thing as Zhongli or Shengling. You just use your stuff at the same moment. So we can skip that one. What I will do though, I'll cover VV Vape rotations with Yelan. Let's start with the amber ones. You have two main VV Vape rotations. You've got the one that uses an early Kazuha burst and the one that uses a late Kazuha burst. Or, I mean, I guess technically you can also just not use Kazuha's burst, but I wouldn't recommend it. The one that uses an early Kazuha burst is a lot more likely to run into hydro application problems towards the end of the rotation. Because what you generally want to do is you want to hydro infuse your Kazuha burst so that you keep applying hydro for a little bit longer. And since Yelan can have difficulty keeping up with Hu Tao's power application, then having the hydro infused Kazuha burst will be very useful. So, what we're doing, we apply hydro, we trigger instructor set, we wait for it to be applied with pyro, we trigger VV, we attack once to remove the pyro, we use our burst, it's not infusing with anything, and then once we attack, we apply hydro, and that hydro infuses Kazuha's burst. But if you do it in normal time, so you start with the typical Yelan stuff, then Amber Burst, then wait a little bit, Kazuha Burst, once you've got Pyro on the enemy, attack once, burst, attack once, and you keep going like this. And as you can see, we're actually getting a, the Hydro Infused Kazuha Burst is lasting basically for the whole duration of Hu Tao's E. At the end of the rotation like this, you would just want to go to Kazuha, use his E once, and then start over. The reason why you want to swap back to Kazuha is because if you don't, you're gonna end up struggling with your energy generation on your Kazuha, and you're not gonna get his burst again for the second rotation. You start over.
Birds call!
The other rotation that you can make is you can use an early Kazuha burst, so you can basically use Kazuha's burst before Amber's burst. It's a little bit more tight on the timing, but it's still doable. But the problem is, your Kazuha burst will expire a lot earlier. And as you can see, we're missing vapes because of it. Right? Because our Kazuha burst expired earlier, we ended up missing a few more vapes. Now, obviously, I didn't play it perfectly. I don't have C1, I ran out of stamina, all that shit, right? But you noticed, I hope, that there was a pyro aura on the enemy and we weren't vaping anymore. The reason why that happened is because you basically have 3 separate sources of pyro application on Hu Tao. You have Blood Blossom, you have her normal attack, and you have her charge attack. And if all 3 of those happen in a relatively short time frame, it will overtake Yelan's hydro application. Hello? Is it empty? That's the setups with Amber for VV Vape. We can take a look at other pyros. The thing is, I don't know the setups for the other pyros as well as I know these ones. You can look at Yanfei. Now, Yanfei's... What's Yanfei's gauge? Does she have anything that does 2U? Her burst is 2. Okay. How does that hit? Anyways, whatever. Hopefully you get the idea. You need a fuck ton of ER on your Yanfei. This is definitely not even close to enough. People very often run Prototype Amber just for the energy it gives. Now, if you have C4 Yanfei, you get a pretty fucking solid shield. And Yanfei doesn't fuck with your pyro application the same way that Xinyan and Thoma does. But yeah, that's the rotation. So it's relatively same idea. Just make sure you don't do a normal attack. So you want to do the same start. Apply Hydro with Yelan EQ. Then on Yanfei, use her E, her burst, and a charge attack. Now, as long as you don't do the burst last, you'll be fine. You have to do the burst either the first or the second. And that's gonna basically apply Pyro. Then you Kazuha E, auto, burst, auto, Hu Tao E. Now, with Thoma, it just doesn't fucking work. Now, Xinyan, whenever you swap with her shield active, if you look at in the bottom, right? Whenever you swap, it reapplies Pyro to your character, which means it's gonna fucking take over your infusion. It's a pain in the ass. Honestly, man, play Amber or play Yanfei. When it comes to Yelan, Hu Tao, VV Vape teams, just don't go with the other ones. Okay, let's look at the Sucrose ones. So the thing with Sucrose is it's a lot harder to reliably get the right infusion on her burst, and her burst can stagger enemies upwards, which will make you miss charge attacks on Hu Tao. So people generally don't use her burst in Hu Tao teams. And with Yelan, if you don't have another external source of Hydro, you're a lot more likely to run out of Hydro application and kind of just fuck your Hydro application over and miss a lot of vapes on your charge attacks. So that is something that you should be careful of, or careful about. It still works, but it's less reliable, and overall, just less good. So it should be Yelan E, Q, Amber Q, Sucrose, auto, auto E. But yeah, it's just not. I pressed N instead of M. I tried to open my map by pressing M, but I pressed N on my keyboard instead, and because of that, it didn't pause the game and I died. I hate my life, man. I would say if you don't have C2 Yelan, I generally wouldn't recommend Sucrose for VV Vape, and I'm not really gonna cover her rotations much. So let's move on to a non-Hu Tao team. What about double Vape Bennett? We can do that. But it's a very straightforward team. You basically do your double Hydro, then Bennett Changling, then 2 Bennett E's, then Yelan E, then back to Bennett until Xingqi's burst is off cooldown, which you'll see in your sidebar. Okay, in these teams, you'll generally have either Xingqi or Yelan on Noblesse. You'll have your Bennett on Crimson Witch. Your damage is going to be dealt by a mix of Bennett vaping, Xingqi and Yelan just base damage, and Changling vaping. Now this is a team, unlike Hu Tao, where it is actually realistic to swap out of your carry and go into Yelan to use a second E on your rotation. So, Xingqi EQ, Yelan EQ auto E, Bennett burst auto E, Changling auto E, auto burst auto E, Bennett auto E, Bennett auto E. Swap the Yelan, get 1 E in, back to Bennett, auto E, very cool. And then you go back to Xingqi, and you do your stuff. As straightforward as that. Who's next? Tazer? We didn't look at a Tazer team. We can look at like Sucrose, Fischl with double Hydro. So in this team, very similar idea. Xingqi lasts longer, then Yelan, then Fischl, then Sucrose. I know I pressed Q, but whatever. This is basically your rotation. right? There's not much to say about a team like this because your rotations are relatively flexible, and all you need to do is just make sure that your bursts are always active and you'll be fine. I feel that the only other team where like there's relevant setup is Soup left, right? Something like this, right? Something like Sunfire Gene here. The main like reasoning behind this is you start with Raiden E because you always do, and then you have to find a moment in your rotation where you want to reuse it, and that's generally just at the end of her burst. With that out of the way, you want to get your Yelan burst, and you want to get your Bennett burst in, because ideally you want to have really good like overlap between your different uptimes. You want to have your Sunfire going and your VV effect going all at the same time, and effectively, if you start with Raiden E, Yelan EQ, Bennett burst, Gene auto E, auto Q, that's gonna give you all the swirls you need. And you can just keep going on your Raiden. And you back to Gene once, back to Bennett once, just to battery your stuff properly, and then you just start over. Now, the main advantage of this team over the Xingqi team, I mean, there's two main advantages of Soup, Sunfire Gene with Yelan over Xingqi. So you're losing out on some Hydro application, which is a downside, which means a few of your Sunfire procs are not gonna vape. You're also gonna probably lose a few Electrocharge procs on Raiden and Xingqi. In exchange for that, what you're getting is you're getting higher damage out of your Raiden because, well, you got Yelan's buff. And what you're getting that's a lot more subtle is you're getting shorter rotations. Xingqi's E is 21 second cooldown. With the gas time, it ends up being like almost 22. Gene's burst is 20. In this team, the longest cooldown you have is Gene's burst. In the Xingqi team, well, it's Xingqi's E. Why am I doing N5? Because I am tired, and you can shut up, okay? All right, shut up. Yeah, you would be supposed to do N3C, but fuck it, man. I can't be bothered. Do I think Eula has some potential with Yelan? I mean, I've talked about Eula with Hydro before. I think that people are very quick to dismiss Eula with Hydro units because they view Shatter as something that is not desirable. But the freeze is like, even though you don't have great uptime on it, is actually somewhat useful. And some of the Hydro units are just good enough to run even if there's no synergy on your team. Eula Xingqi and Eula Kokomi have been fine options in Eula teams for a while. So you'll have the same thing with Yelan. But do I think it's a very good use of your Yelan? No, I don't. But at the end of the day, if you like Eula, give it a shot. Why not? Okay, are there any other teams where specific setups could be complicated for Yelan? No Diluc teams? I mean, I guess we could look at a Diluc team. I mean, not necessarily a Diluc team, but just with Bennett instead as the Pyro op. I mean, generally you don't play Hu Tao with Bennett, but other Pyro units can use Bennett. So, because Yelan has 2 units of Hydro application, then you can do Yelan EQ. Into Bennett burst, into Kazuha hold E, and that's gonna just double swirl by itself. Right? Like, that will by itself be a double swirl. When it comes to Sucrose, I guess with Sucrose you would probably do something like this. So instead of doing EQ on Yelan, you do like Q auto, E auto. Just to make sure that you remove the 2 units, or like you decay the 2 units. So Q auto, E auto, breakthrough barb, auto, Bennett burst, E, Sucrose, E, auto, auto, E, out. But yeah, basically because her burst doesn't last as long as Xingqi's, then, or let's see, as C2 Xingqi's, then longer setups that require slightly more dank stuff. So, for example, Bennett Sucrose, with your last power unit being whatever, will generally, well, they take longer, which means you'll have less of an uptime period with Yelan's burst active. So generally, this is a thing that Kazuha is better than Sucrose at. But yeah. What other teams are there that we would want to look at? Yelan National? I don't like Yelan National. I think it's shit. But sure, why not? So, alright, so when I was reviewing the footage, I kind of realized that I kind of messed up for the Yelan National rotation. So here's the one you actually want to do. So you start with Q, then Bennett burst, Angling E. Okay. Then immediately you go to Yelan. Start her stuff. Very cool. And then here, do one E, give the particles, and then start over. Because you want to make it so that you get your E on Yelan as soon as you swell back to her on the second rotation. So you kind of have to use your E like a little bit before your burst, right? While your burst isn't active for your like second E. I mean, I guess from the second rotation onwards you get to vape it, which is nice. So the main problem with this team is you basically have to stay on Yelan. Technically, I mean, if you don't have C6 Bennett, you could stay on Zhongli, but I have C6 Bennett, so I can't. We're not Sucrose, because if you go on Sucrose, your Sucrose will swirl off some of the hydro, and you're actually gonna get even less hydro application, and basically you'll fuck over your hydro app. I can show you if you want. Okay, so we make sure we use our E on this. We fucked over our hydro app instantly as soon as we swapped the Sucrose. And we're not getting any more vapes. Now take off artifacts to show rotations? Yes, indeed. I'm not doing this little damage with my usual stuff, don't worry. But yeah, so if you've got any questions regarding any of the specific rotations, you can leave them in the comments. I'll probably pin a comment with rotations for whatever I've forgotten about or didn't think of with Yelan. Other than that, you can leave in the comments which unit you want to see next for rotations. It can be a carry, it can be a support, it can be whatever the heck you guys want. Let me know what you want to see. And that'll be it.